Of it all, untouchable, a new animal. This is how legends are made. This is how legends are made. This is how legends are made.
Hey guys, what's going on? This is Jeremy LaRose. This is another video of LSH Live. This is for our $25 All-Star patrons. So in this video, I want to talk about transitions. So I know we've touched on it a lot in the past. We've talked about it a bit, and we're going to talk about it to death because I truly believe it is one of the most important things that you can teach your horse, and probably one of the most difficult things to teach as well. So it really involves retraining ourselves as riders more so than just our horses, because we've got to think about transitions in a different way. We've got to think about our feet and what they mean, the message that we send to our horse in a different way. So for us, when we do transitions, it's more about making that horse make a move underneath of us. So when we put our spurs in, we ask this horse to make a move up underneath of us rather than forward. So there's a lot that goes into it as far as like teaching your horse how to take the transition properly, how to get correct on our feet, how to get round on our spurs, not go forward, sit on our feet, round up off of our spurs. There's a lot that goes into it. What you will do when you work with your horses at home is 90% of the time when we go to clinics, I would say that horses just lope off because you put a spur into them. So our horses are specifically trained to never take a transition unless we kiss. So I want to be able to put my spurs in, have my horse get round underneath of me, and then if I need to do something, then I'll give it a gear. So I can round my feet, I can push my hip over, I can get that horse up underneath of me, whether I'm asking for a jog off or a lope off. My feet don't necessarily change. So this is something we talk a lot about in pleasure as well as in horsemanship and showmanship too. So that horse is not going to lope off just because my outside foot is back and my inside foot is forward. So that's for shape. What we then reserve is our voice controls whether our horse jogs or lopes or walks or whatever it does. It could back up. We could back up in a shape with my outside foot back and my inside leg forward. What I can promise the vast majority of you is you'll go home and you'll work on your horse and you're going to put your outside foot on and your horse is going to immediately lope off. Because it just understands that when mom puts my foot there or dad puts his foot there, I'm going to lope off. And we want to take that idea away from our horse. So I want my horse to think, I've got a shape up underneath of me. Oh, there's a kiss. I'm going to lope off. Regardless of what shape I'm in, I'm going to lope off. So there's going to be times where we ask our horse to be super canted to the inside. And we'll ask her to lope out of that. And there's going to be times where I ask her to lope off straight. So when we go to make her a horsemanship horse, we're going to ask her to lope off straight. I don't want her to be kicked way over. So I've got to think about my transitions as the most important part of my lope or my jog or whatever it is. So if I don't have a good transition, the odds of me having a good lope afterwards are just not good. So I've got to use my transition and let my horse tell me if I lope off and I sling my head up into the air, that tells me I have a fundamental misunderstanding of what my legs are supposed to be doing when I lope. So if I lope my horse off and its head slings straight into the air, I know they're not using their back. And it's not by kicking them at a lope I'm going to fix that, because they already started out flat. Right? If they flung their head in the air and they got their pole above their withers, they started off flat. And it's not going to get better by spurring them and raking my spurs in their belly while I lope around. I've got to take my time, teach my transitions properly, and make sure that my horse understands the way it's supposed to use its body. So I want to give you guys this perspective from a couple different horses here, because we've got the super high-end horses like Andy's here at the World Show, and then we've got Pina that kind of understands how she's supposed to do transition. We've got Enzo that's starting to learn how to do a transition, and then we're going to have two new horses coming in over the next couple weeks that don't know anything, right? So we're going to be teaching those horses transitions from the ground up. So depending on where your horse is, find out what starting point that you're at, and then figure out how do we get the steps in to get those good transitions that we're looking for, because they're the most important thing to me aside from being able to gallop your horse up. So those two things, those make pleasure horses. Those make broke horses. You've got to be able to do both. If you can't do both, go back and address those holes in your program, because they're going to shut you down and they're going to bite you in the butt later on. So you're going to hit a wall with your program. Now, the first transitions I want to look at, Andy Cochran here at the Congress Masters Western Pleasure, he won it on this horse. He then went on to win the World Show. And I think his transition here from a walk to a lope is really what we're looking for. And we laugh because we go to these clinics all over the world, and if you've been to one, you've seen us bounce on our horses when we start teaching our horse how to do transitions right. So to me, what we do is we close both of our spurs. That's going to provide shape to our horse. So our outside foot's going to go back, and our inside leg is going to stay close to our belly, keeping our ribs from dumping over. Because we have both spurs on, I want my horse to lift up. The way we do that is by lifting our weight off of their back, and we can kind of bounce on them. So when we have a more advanced horse like Andy's here, that transition happens right here. He lifts his seat, and that horse comes up and gets round to him. So it doesn't think about going forward. We don't scoot our seat forward. We lift up and let that horse rock and come up underneath of us. It's always a funny part of our clinics because people laugh at me when I'm doing it. But if my horse were to lift underneath of me, you wouldn't see it. So you see a big bounce out of Andy's seat. That's exactly the same thing we're doing. So it was really cool to watch this back and be like, he does the same thing. That's so cool. So for us, it's kind of vindication, right? Because we've been doing this for a while, and it's something that I added into my program a couple years back, and I've loved the results. So the way I think about that is if I've got both spurs on, my horse can't go left or right. If he understands that he's not supposed to shove into my hands, then he can't go forward. And I'm kissing, so he shouldn't go backwards. So where can he go? I want to give him a way out by lifting my seat up off of his back and have his back come up to me and get round underneath of me. So by lifting my weight off of him, I kind of take the pressure off and I give him a way to lift, and I give him an exit. So the weird thing about horses is if you don't give them a way out, they're going to make one. So everything that we do when we train is thinking about what door are we closing, what door are we opening, so that our horse always has a way that he can go, that he gets away from the pressure. If I don't give him a way out, then he's going to make one, and I'm probably not going to be real happy with the results of that. So what I try to do is make it very clear which way you can go. By exaggerating that position, he can really lift up underneath of me. And he does it again here at the World Show. You see that bounce right before he goes lope off, gives that horse a spot underneath of him that he can round his back, and just takes the pressure off. Again, if I'm sitting heavy on my horse, I'm sitting down into him, then I'm not going to give that horse a reason to lift up his back. So you got to think about the way you're sitting in the saddle. If you're sitting heavy, if you're plopped on them, there's no way they're going to round up and carry you around. So what we're doing is we're closing our outside spur. We're not raking our outside spur. We're actually going to swing our inside leg at him, tap this inside leg, and then boom, right there, you see him stand up. And he really starts that lope in his seat first to help that horse round up. By starting the lope in your seat rather than off of your feet, you're not going to chase that horse forward and push it on and encourage it to extend its stride. We don't want our horse to extend its stride. We want it to come up and get round underneath of us. If we want to have our horse go forward from there, we can always ask for more. But it's so important that horse rolls up to us. So what we want to do is want to get a horse that really listens to our seat well. If they'll listen to our seat well, then we'll have a horse in the end that we can do pattern events with and have the cues be imperceptible. I have to think about it as if my horse would lift its back to me when I lift up out of the saddle, you won't see it happen. So for your horses at home, you're probably going to have to reteach them these transitions and what your feet and your voice mean if you want to take advantage of this. To me, it's December 9th. You've got plenty of time between now and April to retrain your transitions if you really make it a priority of yours. So we're using this time. This is our off season. This is a great time to work on all those things because you kind of got to tear your horse apart a little bit, especially if you make it a horsemanship horse or it's already a horsemanship horse. You're going to have to retrain those transitions, and there's going to be some confusion in your horse as you go about doing that. You kind of have to think of it as when you're retraining your horse, you have to untrain the old habits and then retrain new habits. So you're actually training that horse twice. It's much easier to take a horse like Enzo here and just teach him right from the beginning. So I can very quickly call his mistakes and he doesn't get too frustrated because he doesn't really know anything yet. So he's going to really figure out the difference between doing it right and doing it wrong, because if he does it right, I let him lope on. So if he gets that transition wrong, I'll just stop him, set him back up, get his weight balance where it needs to be, and then ask him to lope back off. So if he misses that 10 times in a row, I'm going to do 10 transitions. Okay. And I'm just going to stay after it until I get the one that I'm looking for. And that might be my workout for the day. That might be my whole ride. After I get the transition, I'm going to let him lope around a little bit, and then I'm going to stop and pet him and be done. So one thing about my horse right here is he wants to pop his outside front off the ground really high when he goes to lope off. And I think that indirect turn really helps that. So we're going to address the different kinds of transitions that we do and the different kinds of maneuvers we do to fix the transitions. But you have to think there's a couple basic ones. So there's a regular turn, an indirect turn, a hip around, and a side pass. So we use all three of those to get transitions the way we want them to be. We saw Andy's horse. It's kind of the closer to finished ideal transition that we're looking for, where he can get it set up on his feet and he can lift his seat up into it. And if we don't have that, then we've got to create that somehow. So we got to find a good starting point. So everybody that's watching these videos has horses that are different stages of training, and every horse that you've seen in our videos are at different stages of training. So it's the hardest part to me is figuring out where am I on this scale of broke or good transitions or bad transitions, or where am I at? The benefit that you guys have as our all-star patrons is you can send videos in of your transitions, and we'll help you figure it out where you are on that spectrum and which maneuver you should do to help fix it. So kind of the basic idea is if I set my horse up on my feet and he doesn't get there, I'm going to push his hips around. If I'm starting a young horse, I'm going to push their hips around and ask them to lope off from there. The big thing about that, when I go to move their body, I'm going to keep my outside leg really steady, and you see me tap my inside to go to lope off here. So the key to that, and there he really flung his front leg out there, so this is going to be an indirect turn. The key to that is my inside leg is asking his rib cage to come up. Because I've got my outside spur on, he can't go to the right. So if I tap my left leg here, he's going to lift up underneath of me. And that's really the key to it, is that my horse lifts up. If I'm grinding my outside spur and I'm raking that foot on him, then he's going to just shove his hip more to the inside, or at least he should if he's trained properly. He's going to get off of my right foot, and he's going to shove his hip to the inside. And that's just going to be a hip that runs away. So from there, my horse can do one of two things. Either it's going to lope off and be super overcanted, or it's going to lope off and go directly to the right, so to the outside of my circle, and then it's never going to have to get round or get underneath itself. So I want to have a horse that will get underneath itself and then step forward round with its back end, lift that loin, and pick me up out of the saddle. So it's a hip around, tapping this right foot, ask this horse to lope off in this shape. This is what it starts like. Obviously, if he shoves too much, I've kind of got a rule book set in my mind as to how much shove is too much. And then I'm going to push him around, ask him to lope back off again. If he jumps forward with his front end, like they're likely to do, that's an indirect turn or a direct turn. So I'm going to ask those front feet to open up, open their shoulders, and then lope back off. So with this horse in particular, he's really learning these. So I catch his hip over this inside. He pushes on my hands right here, so I'm going to back him off that bit. I'm going to say, hey, there's a wall right there that you do not lean your shoulders into. So I couldn't lope out of that because he's going to shove his shoulders. And I just know that about this horse. I know it's the most common problem that he's going to have. So I'm going to push his hip back around. You see me just kind of tilt his head over the outside, bring him back over this inside, little tap, tap, tap on this inside, and then ask him to lope back up. Now you see he almost missed his lead. His right front goes ahead of his left front. That's a stop. That's a correction. He cannot lope off like that. He can't jump through that transition. So we're going to put that right front back underneath of him with this indirect turn. So asking this right front to step back, which will make his left front swing in front right there. He's not too sure about it, but then we can lope back off. And you're going to see a different type of transition. See that front leg, his left front leg, straighten out for this transition versus the other one where it didn't even get a chance to because he almost picked up his right lead. In this video, he got all of his leads, but it's been a common problem with this horse. It's not because he doesn't know his leads. It's just because he doesn't have his body where it needs to be in order to lope off correctly. So what I like about his lope afterwards, he really stands his shoulders up. He's splitting his legs well. And even though he's got his head up, his body's getting right. So I know that if he stands his shoulders up and then I can make a straight line and control his hip, then his face will be really easy to control down the road. So as he gets round in his belly, as he learns not to push on my hands, then his face will be super easy to get. So I'm not worried about that. You kind of got to think about, he's got to pick his neck up to get his shoulders up in the beginning to shift that weight onto his back end. So again, we're going to reset him onto his hip here. We're going to ask this left front to swing around his right front right there. And then it steps back wrong. I'm not getting after him for this. I just know he needs to do a million more of them. So when your horse goes to do this and you start teaching these transitions, don't be afraid to do a bunch of them, right? Don't be afraid to go out there and reset your horse a couple of times and say, hey, either you get it right or you get it wrong. Doesn't matter to me. We're just going to do a bunch. So I like that lope off right there a lot better. He lifts his back end up a little bit more. He kind of respects my legs a little bit. And then until right here, I ask for my right leg. I say, hey, push your hip into this. And he kind of leans into me. That's when I shut it back down. So I say, hey, you know what? We need to do a lot more transitions. So we're going to call that mistake and we're going to use that as an opportunity to do another transition. So we'll go back into this. Again, bring him over the inside. I can shuffle my hands here. He brings his face to me. And then I can tap this inside, lift my seat, and I don't get quite the shove that I had. But it's still wrong. So going to correct it, going to back this back off, say, hey, don't push on my hands, stand these shoulders up, hold these shoulders up on your own. I'm not going to babysit your shoulders. We're going to do another one. We're going to, because this was awful before, he needs to do a lot more of these indirect turns. So bring your right front underneath of you, swing your left front around, reset your weight back there. Let's try another transition. Better, started off more round. Okay, fine. I'll let you lope on. So this is what it starts like. We've seen what it ends like. We've seen what it starts like. If you go back and watch all of our videos, we've covered a lot of transitions with Peanut and Marley. I just wanted to give you guys a heads up as to how important it is. Pay attention to how we're doing these transitions. Pay attention to how you're doing those transitions. So if they don't start right, they won't finish right. So that's it for today's video, guys. I want to cover more of this. This is going to be part one of a many-part series. So I really want to go in depth with this. I want to start with the new horse that we get in, the 3-year-olds that are just getting broke out. We're going to cover those a lot as to what the transition starts like. For me, it starts on the lunge line before we ever get on their back. So we're going to cover that a lot over the next couple weeks. Thank you so much for tuning in today, guys. We love you guys. You're all-star patrons. You guys are amazing. We wouldn't be able to do this without you guys. So thank you so much, and I will see you in the next video.
I'm cranking up on the throttle, victory is mine.